Hello, welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is Great Big History Podcast. China, 1800 1930, Part 1. In the next couple of lectures, we're going to do Qing collapse, Western imperialism against China, the Republic of China, warlords, civil war, and communists. So we'll see how far we get, and then we'll break, and we'll have another episode, and we'll see how far that gets, and then we'll break, and then we'll finish. So there's 2 to 3 episodes in China in 1800 1930. Positives for China. Qing China was militarily successful. It was the dominant imperial power in Asia. Military success led to giant China. This is the largest China really had ever been. It was finally peace with the nomads, with the Mongols, with the Manchus, with the Jin, with the Turks and the other Muslims out in the West. After 5,000 years of conflict, by 1800, the Qin of all of the dynasties had finally solved the problem, had united all of these territories, had won. It stretched from the Himalayas to the ocean, from the forests of Siberia to the jungles of Vietnam. Countries on its borders that it didn't own were allied, were peaceful. All of them, except for Japan, saw China as the leading power, and even Japan wouldn't mess with it. Japanese pirates are Japanese pirates, but as a state, Japan was small, broken up, disunited. And under the Tokugawa, peaceful, but quiescent. The Qing had huge industries for luxury exports: porcelain, tea, silk. The ocean trade was replacing land routes to the Middle East that had been shut off after the collapse of the Silk Road in the 1500s. Mexico's silver monetized the economy so that people used coin money made of silver. Literature and culture and literacy all exploded. In this period, we have the greatest novel of the age is The Dream of the Red Chamber. It's an Anna Karenina type story. It's the decline of a great family. The emperors emphasized education, knowledge, and the Great Library had 36,000 volumes. Qing China had 400 million people in it, twice the size of Europe, which was itself broken up, disunited. In Qing China, there was peace, there was law, there was education, there was economic success. Jianlong, his male advisors were stealing money from the old man, just like 18th century Russian oligarchs today. Well, 18th century oligarchs, they pocketed the money. They were stealing right out of the budget. Low taxes meant there was no money. And the end of the silver trade hurt too. And the silver trade through the Philippines from Mexico ends around 1820, which means there's not pure money coming in. We're going to see that with the British and their opium, because the British are not going to want to spend money. And so there's no money coming in. 2, the British controlled India and were victorious in Napoleonic Europe. They replaced the Portuguese and the Dutch in the Chinese trade. They had power and the time to change the relationship between Europe and China. Neither the Portuguese or the Dutch had the power to do much to push China around. The Portuguese had been beaten up by Ming China and had been told, you trade in Macau, as we discussed. The Dutch, more or less the same thing. Having been conquered by Napoleonic France, the Dutch were in no condition to take on China, Qing China. The British were. But China doesn't want any of the goods. It doesn't want. With 400 million people, it produces what it needs. The British don't have anything the Chinese could want. Except one thing. We'll talk about that later. More education was also a problem. And you say, oh, why is that a problem? Education is good. Yeah, only if there's the jobs for it. And there wasn't jobs for the middle classes. The best jobs were government jobs. And even though the population was expanding, the government wasn't. We go back to the low taxes, the no money. Keeping the peace meant you didn't expand the government. And everything I read, I didn't think this would be a big deal, but everything I read talked about in this period how the local governors went from dealing with 20,000 people to 200,000 people each. So they became overwhelmed. That local government had too many people for the places. Think of higher education today. Think of profs today. There might be 20, 30 jobs, tenure track jobs in sociology in a given year. But there's 200 PhDs every year. That means there's 180 extra. And what are they going to do? Where are they going to go? They expected to be college professors, and there's nowhere for them to go. This is the problem. You have people graduating, taking these civic service exams, expecting to become a Mandarin, to get paid well, to do a good job, to serve the emperor. But there's no jobs. So what do they do? And this happens year after year after year. So you're getting this giant backlog of people who feel frustrated with their lives, who feel let down by the emperor, who feel let down by the entire promise of the Qin economy. It's not working for them. Problematically, even though it has 400 million people, it's huge, it's a continent, it's as big as the United States. It didn't have the culture to support science, technology, economic advancements, innovations. There is no industrial revolution in Qing China. Because it's a traditional state, because of Confucianism, because the Qing are Manchus, they're not Han. And so everything about this century is to keep the peace, is traditions, is to keep things working, and change is bad. So it's conservatism plus peace equals doing the same thing over and over again. And so the 19th century is boring but average emperors. I would love to say there is a string of terrible ones. No, there's just not. They're just not great, but they're not bad. There's some, and we'll talk about it, are manipulated by their moms and not given a chance. But they're not. No emperor destroys China. It's just none of them can save China either. It's a conservative, boring place that doesn't want to rock the boat. But the problem is that the world is changing around it. The Qing can dominate all of their enemies, all the people around them. Not conquer them, because if you go into the other lectures, you'll see Qing armies lose in Vietnam, for example. They are humiliated from time to time. There is rot setting in the army in the 19th century. But it's so big and has so many people. And even with, I say no money, Qing China is not bankrupt. It just doesn't have money for the innovations. It has money to keep the engine turning. But there's no reason that China couldn't have had a steam engine. There's no reason, given the sizes that we're dealing with and the population centers, China couldn't have invented the railroad. There's no reason Qing China couldn't have been the industrial power, except it didn't have to be. It didn't need to be. And the conservatism of the society, especially the Manchu Qing elite class, meant there was no engine pushing for change. They didn't want change because it would, as we're going to see, it's dangerous for the Qin. Problems continued. You get the White Lotus Rebellion in 1794 to 1804. So 10 years. It's an anti-tax peasant revolt. Now you go, well, taxes are low. And you go, yeah, but there's always a governor who will extort some taxes. There's always an earthquake that needs to be fixed. And so while taxes are low in China in general, in specific places, they might be jacked up for a few years. And what you end up with is a anti-tax revolt. Peasants revolt against the anti-taxes. Now, the White Lotus are this anti-Confucian boogeyman. When we do the Korea, we'll talk about the Tonghak. It'll be the Tay Son in Vietnam. The White Lotus are this peasant millennialist group that has lots of folk ideas in it, and it takes on lots of different. It doesn't have one ideology; it takes on many ideologies. But this is a boogeyman. The White Lotus Rebellion probably doesn't really have White Lotus in it. It goes back to the 1300s. But it's like, think in America, you have the Tea Party or Jacobin in France. It stands in for something. Like the Tea Party is everybody who's anti-tax. Like so in 2010, when a bunch of people didn't like Obamacare, they called themselves the Tea Party because they were harking back to 1776. And this idea of limited government. Jacobins, it goes back to the French Revolution. And so it's a anti-tax peasant revolt that takes on the airs of traditional peasant rebellions. The poor provincial troops are defeated by the peasant guerrillas. So you send in the real army. This is a problem happening on the provinces. This is a problem happening in the Qin. While the core army of the Qin is excellent, is still good. It's got gunpowder, it's got cannon. It's still good. The provincial armies are bad and or unreliable. Armies sent to Vietnam and Korea will also be defeated by peasant armies. By armies that shouldn't win, that don't have the technology. And so it's telling you that the provincial armies are already rotting. They don't have good troops. They don't have good training. They don't have good materials. They're starved of funds. And now they're losing in China itself. And that's going to be dangerous when we get to the 1860s. In 1813, an assassination attempt nearly succeeded on killing the emperor. They broke into the Forbidden City. The place it's like breaking into, it's like a bunch of millennialist, end of the world, QAnon kind of people breaking into the White House to assassinate the president. Like, it shouldn't happen. And yet it almost did, showing just how problematic legitimacy is for the Qing emperors at this time. It's dangerous all of a sudden. Another social problem is the population is growing. Farmers are getting poorer. Why? Because the land is being divided. So you have a choice if you're a parent. As the population grows, the land stays under cultivation. Now, there will be some colonization, which we'll talk about, but for the core areas of eastern and southern China, you're a parent. You have 2 sons. What do? You have a choice. You can divide up your land and give it to your 2 sons. Okay. But now they're each making half as much as you made. They're going to be half as poor. They're going to have half as much money as you did, as when they did growing up. So they got poorer. Or you leave it all to one son, which is what farmers would like to do, but then the other son gets nothing. So again, the farmers are getting poorer as land gets more divided. So the Han population, now remember, Han is the majority Chinese ethnic group, but the Han population had to move into more farther afield territories. They had to move north into Manchuria, they had to move northwest into Inner Mongolia, and they had to move west into Xinjiang, the far out provinces where there aren't many Han. 25 million Han will move into Manchuria, effectively making Manchuria what used to be a foreign land for 5,000 years. It was the land beyond the wall. Now it's part of China. It's going to effectively be settled by Han Chinese. But that brings them into conflict with local ethnic groups, which is a problem because the Manchus, the Qin dynasty, is Manchu. So the people, the Manchus and the Jin and the nomadic peoples, the peoples beyond the wall, go to the Manchus and say, yo, cuz, what are you doing? And yet the Manchus can't, the Qin can't stop the settlers, because if they don't, they'll have a rebellion from poor farmers. But if they let them move into Manchuria, it's changing Manchuria into China. They're losing the culture of the very place they came from, and accused of backstabbing their own cousins by doing it. After 1820, Xinjiang is open for settlement. It's the farthest west province. It's way out there. And that's going to bring up conflict with the Uyghurs, and a Muslim group, and the Kocha Islamic group. And so you're going to get wars. So now all of a sudden the Qin dynasty has to, not only does it have problems with its armies, that it can't rely on them, it now has to send them to far distant colonial lands in order to fight wars against people who you didn't have to fight wars against before, because they were provincials. They were, all right, technically you own them, but technically they also were so far away, they did their own thing. So they were in the borders of China, but at the same time they weren't Chinese. They weren't part of China. They were running themselves. Well, now they're coming into conflict with the settlers, which you have to endorse, otherwise there's no land. So you could see the problem. So this is these are the problems that the Qin emperors are dealing with when the British show up. And what the British do is the British own or are in the process of conquering India, what is today India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. They're in the process of absorbing these places, and it will be completed after an Indian revolt called the Sepoy Mutiny in the 1850s, is when Britain will take over and run India. And the British Raj at the time meant India today, part of Burma, Pakistan today, and southern Afghanistan today. So it is massive territory. And so one of the things India produces, a lot of, that the farmers, especially in Afghanistan and the northern Indus, produce, is poppy, is opium. Now, that's a problem. Because one, people like drugs. And so selling it is something British corporations would like to do. The British government would like to make money off of this stuff. The problem is that if you import it into Britain at the cheap prices that is being produced at, you turn all of the British and Welsh people and a good percentage of the Scots, they're far in the north, but you turn a lot of British people into drug addicts. And that's usually not something governments like doing. Governments want you to work hard, make money, pay your taxes. Hanging out all day smoking dope is not what governments want. So, it's got a problem with opium. Now, opium's also a medicine. It's a painkiller. It is one of the best painkillers. If I'm not wrong, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think I understand it to be morphine is the best naturally created painkiller. Like, it's not synthetic. I don't know all the ingredients that go in the morphine, but it's not a synthetic drug. It's made from a thing that actually grows. Well, so it's got this opium, and they don't really know what to do with it. And then there's the problem of China. They want to buy the silks and the porcelain and the teak and the wood and all the stuff that China produces, the dyes and the inks, right? All these luxury items. But the Qing want silver. They want money for it. They don't want to barter. They don't want to trade. They want money. And they don't even want paper money. They don't want British pounds or notes. They want hard currency. Okay. That runs into a problem. And that problem is economic philosophy in the 1800s. Economic philosophy in the 1800s was a zero-sum game. It's not like today. The idea then is that if I give you money, I am poorer. I have less money. What you wanted to do was hoard your money. Have as much money as possible. Have as much silver and gold as possible. Because that made you richer. So if you gave the Chinese silver, you would be getting poorer and the Chinese would be getting richer. And you see it's a very natural way of thinking. I want to say it's basic, but it's not. It's just natural. It's Donald Trump believes this about economics, and he's not the only one. Lots of people think of it as, you see trade imbalance, and you go, it's how the news presents it. It's a trade imbalance. We have a trade imbalance with China of $5 billion. That means we are buying $5 billion more goods than they are, which means we're sending them money, which means we're getting poorer. That's the way of thinking about it. It's a very basic way of thinking about it. It's very economics 101. Economics is way more complicated than that. But that's the natural way people understand it. And so you could understand the British government does not like the idea of companies, British companies, sending British silver and gold to China. Because what if you need that for taxes? What if you need it for war? What if there's a run on the banks? You need it. You need that money. And so the British are like, hey, how about we trade? We'll buy your luxuries and you buy something we've got. And Chinese are like, literally, there's a letter to the Emperor of Qin being like, let's make a deal about how much we're going to buy from each other. And the Qin Emperor writes back, goes, but you don't have anything. I don't need guns. I have peace. I don't need your crap clothes. We got silk. Like, we literally don't need anything you're selling. And the British are like, we got opium. So what happens? What happens is the British say, well, you're going to take our opium and we're going to buy your goods. And the Chinese say, no, you're not. Now, meanwhile, while that's going on official channels, there's a black market going on, right? And local Chinese governors are like, yeah, well, I'll take your opium because then I can sell it and I'll make some money on the side. And yeah, we could work something out. So there's a local black market going on, but officially the Qing government doesn't want to buy opium, want to trade in opium. And so the British are like, yeah, you're going to do that. And what basically happens is the Qing government says no, and we're going to stop you from bringing this stuff in. We're going to impound it. We're going to light it on fire. We're going to destroy your crop. No, we don't want it. And they're just like, yeah, you're not doing that. And boom, you start having a battle, and the battle turns into a war, and more ships are sent, and the British blow up the Qin fleet. They sail into even Saigon, I think, and shoot cannon into it. This is a humiliation. The British forced China to buy opium to offset their trade imbalance. The Chinese have to accept opium, which they don't want, in exchange for selling the British luxury items, not silver and gold. They are not. So this is the first and kind of biggest of the unequal treaties that are going to be all over Southeast Asia. The British also took Hong Kong, whereas the Portuguese got stuck to Macau. They were given Macau, this place way down in the south. The British are like, yeah, we're taking Hong Kong as our port. It's ours now. What's the problem? Well, this is humiliation, first of all. The Qing couldn't defeat these Westerners. The second is they lost to drug pushers, which is, embarrassing. We should also note, at the same time the British are pushing drugs on the Chinese, they are also literally ending the slave trade in Africa. So figure that one out. They're being moral in one place and literally stopping other people from trading slaves. Like the British said, the British just said, there's going to be no more slave trade. No one is going to export people from Africa anymore. And we've got a navy, and we're going to do it. Which is kind of crazy to think about. But at the same time, they're like, yo, Chinese people, you're taking our drugs. Now, here's the thing. And this is the interesting point. The Chinese are allowed to tax and place tariffs on British imports. Those goods that they don't want, the opium, they're allowed to tax that. I mean, the British are like, yo, we're not barbarians here. Of course you could tax it. You got a country. You're a government. Sure. You just have to allow us to sell it. You can tax it. Hell, we'll collect the taxes for you. Which you would think would be crazy, except the British were honest. Because the British were very good at paying their civic employees. every 2 weeks, you got your pay like clockwork. And so actually, the British tax collectors, the British customs collectors, collecting the taxes for the selling of the opium and the other goods, actually were more honest than the Qing officials who weren't being paid regularly by this point. Because remember, we go back to there being no money. So the British were actually making money for the emperor, and that made the emperor happy. The problem is this shows that the Qing emperor is now in alliance with the foreigner, and the British have a special trade situation, which meant once the British got it, every European country wanted it. And so you get more unequal treaties as the French show up, as the Russians show up. The Germans later on. So you get what starts as a humiliation against the British becomes a humiliation against everybody. And then the Europeans start dividing up China like they did India and Africa. They say, no. Shanghai is mine. I'm the only European who has rights to this place. And I'm the only European who can sell opium in Beijing. And they start dividing up China the way they do India and Africa. And if you look at our on our video, we have a picture of the day of the European powers and Japan dividing up the pizza pie that is China. While a Qing official yells, "Stop, stop, stop." But look at how caricatured everyone is. And, kind of racist. You got a samurai, a Japanese samurai. You've got Queen Victoria. And you've got Prince William with his helmet and his super martial. He's actually stabbing China, right? You got the French lady, the Russian dude with his little hat, and the most racist drawing of the Qing Chinese I think I can come up with. I can find. He's got the weird facial hair. He's got the giant long fingernails. His skin is green as opposed to white. It's a greenish yellow. I mean, hoy. And so, but they're the Europeans, and you can see if that's the picture they're drawing of China, how much respect do they have for the Chinese civilization, Chinese culture. Well, what happens is the U.S. shows up. Now, this is getting later into about the 1880s into the 1890s, but the U.S. will show up and be like, whoa, 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 whoa. I think we're going to have an open door to China here, which is effect of the USA saying, you get nothing. You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir. We're the biggest economy in the world, which by 1900, the USA clearly is. Orders of magnitude bigger than Britain or France. And getting involved in Japan, they are not going to be locked out of China. Now, the problem is the United States, for all its colonialism within the continent of America, North America, and for all its imperialism, doesn't want to think of itself as an imperial state. And so it says, no. Now, we are not going to conquer parts of China, and neither are you. We're going to all sell our goods to all of China. Now, that works for the United States. One, they showed up late. And two, they have the bigger economy. So they could sell more goods at cheaper prices. So that's an argument that works well. But here's the problem. If you're France, if you're Italy, even if you're Britain, you don't want to tick off the United States economically. you're buying lots of their stuff. Or, more importantly, you're being loaned lots of their money from American banks. And so it's one of the earliest ways where the United States throws its new industrialized economic weight around, where it says, you will not conquer China, and every other country says, okay. At least for a little while, they say, okay. The imperial powers get to trade in each other's zones of influence, quote unquote. They get a zone of influence, but everyone gets to trade there. It keeps Britain and Japan from swallowing up China in the 1890s. So we can see from kind of not the beginning of China's relationship with the West, but pretty early on, there's a relationship with the United States. And it's going to flip-flop. The open door policy is a good thing because it protects China from being swallowed up. The Boxer Rebellion, on the other hand, the Americans are going to invade as well. So that's not a good thing. Republic of China, a good thing. Communist China, not a good thing. So the United States and China have this back and forth relationship through this period from about the 1870s till today. Now, even the open door was a humiliation for China because nobody was asking China. The USA did not come in and go, dear China, would you like us to do this? No, they went to the other European white guys and said, okay, white guys, we're all white here. We're going to talk about white guy stuff. And they said, of course we're going to talk about white guy stuff. We're white guys. Like, all right, let's talk about what we're going to do in China. We are definitely not getting into war over China, right? That means we're just going to sell everybody else's goods there, right? Yeah. Should anyone ask the Qin emperor? Hell no. And so again, China's future. Remember, Qin China is the largest empire in Asia. It is clearly the most important state. And who's determining Chinese policy? London, New York, Washington, D.C. The USA is now a Pacific power and a world economic power. Why? Because it said so. And everyone else agreed. This is going to lead us into the Taiping Rebellion. And kind of the beginning of the end for the Qing. So I guess maybe we should do this on our next episode in our part 2. So we're going to take up the Taiping Rebellion. We're going to take up the fight over whether or not there will be reforms. And what happens to the Qing dynasty. Thank you very much. Be safe.